Carl Jung talked about 6 types of people to stay away from and why. It has been explained practically in this video with character. Let's go. The first time Arav met someone who would later unravel parts of his soul, it was on a cold Tuesday morning in January. He didn't know then that this person would represent a force Carl Jung might have warned him about. A shadow clothed in charm, capable of bending reality with every smile. Arav, 33 years old, driven, intelligent, but burdened with a soft core that longed to understand others, had always prided himself on his empathy. But empathy without discernment, as Jung might say, was a bridge to ruin. His life in Mumbai was organized like clockwork. He rose at 6, jogged around the Marine Drive, sipped his bitter black coffee while reading the Economic Times, and by 8:15 he was inside his cubicle at a sleek advertising firm. He lived alone by choice, but his days were filled with people, clients, co-workers, social media voices, and memories that whispered when the city grew quiet. One of those voices had begun whispering louder lately. It was from a month ago at a networking event where he'd first spoken to Devika. Devika was luminous in a way that confused logic. She didn't walk into a room, she restructured its energy. Her laughter was light, her compliments sharp and timely, and her stories always ended with poetic cadence. She complimented Arav on the wording of his elevator pitch. "Your words have a rhythm," she said. "It's rare to meet someone who speaks like they think in layers." Flattery, Arav thought at the time, but flattery felt good. He didn't see it then, how each word she said was a mirror held up to his desires. She wasn't telling him about him, she was showing him who he wanted to be seen as. And there is a dangerous kind of person, Jung said, who knows how to speak directly to your ego while disguising it as connection. She was the manipulator. Within a week, she was a regular fixture in his life. "Come to this new rooftop bar," she'd text. "You'll love it. Great views, smarter crowd." He followed. She introduced him to her circle, people who seemed as poised and refined as her. They discussed Jung, ironically. They quoted Nietzsche, drank espresso martinis, and laughed in ways that felt rehearsed. Then came the small favors. "Could you look over this deck for me? I trust your eye. Mind if I use your company discount for this printer? Hey, I forgot my wallet. Can you cover the Uber?" Each request was small, plausible, but each one chipped a piece off his boundary wall. What he didn't notice was the quiet contract she was building. Give and maybe you'll be let deeper into the glow. The manipulator doesn't take by force. She invites you to offer. But Devika wasn't the only one. His team lead at work, Sanjay, was another archetype Jung might have warned about, the chronic liar. Sanjay always knew a guy, had just spoken to the client. Closed the deal last night, promoted a buddy in a sister firm. At first, Arav admired him. He moved fast, made decisions with authority, always had an answer. But soon the cracks showed. The client hadn't called back in weeks. The deal was still pending. The buddy he'd promoted called asking if Arav had heard from Sanjay. Lies, Arav realized, weren't just stories. They were weapons. They made you doubt your perception. They fractured trust invisibly. Jung said that lying is a betrayal of the psyche's need for wholeness. A liar forces others into a fractured world, and if you stay too long, you forget what truth feels like. Arav didn't leave right away. He asked questions, gave benefit of the doubt, but soon he was carrying lies he didn't tell, becoming complicit by association. His name was on decks built on fabricated metrics. His email was attached to timelines Sanjay never intended to meet. And then there was Ria. Ria was a mirror of his younger self. Idealistic, emotionally intense, wounded in ways that never fully scabbed over. They met at a mental health awareness talk. She spoke during the Kwanda. Her voice cracked mid-sentence as she described being abandoned emotionally by everyone she ever loved. Afterward, he approached her. "You were brave," he said. Her eyes welled again. "No one ever says that." They began texting, then late-night calls. Then she was showing up outside his building at midnight with cigarettes and poems and questions like, "Why do people always leave?" Arav felt needed, and to be needed to a man unsure of his own place in the world is like heroin. But Ria was the victim-minded person Jung warned of. She didn't want healing. She wanted witnesses. She didn't want solutions. She wanted to stay broken, but never alone. And she resented every attempt Arab made to hold her toward light. "You think you can fix me?" she'd ask, the words a slap. "I'm not your project." Eventually, her sadness turned weaponized. Every time he didn't respond quickly, he was abandoning her. When he canceled plans, it was proof no one ever cared. Her pain began to drown his clarity. "You don't get it," she said one night. "You never really cared. You just wanted to play the hero." It was around this time Arab met Arjun. Arjun was charismatic, successful, and completely hollow. Every conversation circled back to him, his career, his brilliance, his philosophy on how most people were too emotional and too mediocre. At first, Arab mistook it for confidence. Then the mask slipped. When Arab shared a personal win, securing a major account, Arjun responded with a smirk. "Must be a small client. Real accounts don't get signed without face-to-face strategy." Jung described the narcissist as a person who cannot see others as real. They exist only as props in the narcissist's play. Arav soon realized that Arjun only asked questions so he could turn the spotlight back to himself. One evening, Arav mentioned feeling overwhelmed. Arjun laughed. "Bro, I run 3 startups and sleep 4 hours. You don't know pressure." It was dismissal wrapped in bravado. Over time, Arav began dreading his calls, yet he kept answering, somewhere deep inside, still craving approval. The 5th person came in quietly. Mira, an old college friend who had resurfaced online. They met for coffee. She was warm, animated, but her energy shifted when Arav mentioned a promotion. "Must be nice," she said. "Some of us are still stuck in dead-end roles." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Envy, Jung warned, is poison. Not because it wants what you have, but because it resents you for having it. Mira began critiquing everything. "Your photos are too curated. You sound arrogant on LinkedIn. All this success. Are you even happy?" It wasn't feedback, it was corrosion. A slow drip of resentment disguised as concern. And then came the last, perhaps the most dangerous of all, and Mrs. Lobo. She was his neighbor, retired teacher, always on her balcony, always watching. At first, her presence was comforting. She brought sweets during Diwali, asked about his mother. But then the questions became critiques. "Why do you live alone? Why do you come back so late? That girl who visited, was she decent?" Jung spoke of the judgmental as destroyers of the soul's spontaneity. Their gaze is a cage. Mrs. Lobo's gaze followed him everywhere, and soon he began to edit himself. Took the stairs to avoid her, wore quieter clothes, smiled when he didn't want to. He was living in fragments. And that's when it all collapsed. Devika ghosted him after borrowing a significant sum for a consulting opportunity. Sanjay was exposed by HR, fired quietly after shifting blame onto Arav. Ria posted cryptic messages on social media about users who pretend to care. Arjun disappeared when Arav stopped attending his parties. Mira unfollowed him and began tweeting vaguely toxic things that mirrored their last conversation. Mrs. Lobo reported him to the building society for suspicious behavior. One by one, they fell away, not like leaves in autumn, but like shackles being cut. And for the first time in years, Arav sat alone. Not lonely, but alone. It was terrifying. And then it was free. Arav didn't realize how empty his apartment felt until the absence of their voices filled the silence. The tea kettle whistled too loudly now. The ticking of the wall clock, which once soothed him as background rhythm, now struck him as mechanical mockery. Yet for the first time, he chose not to escape the quiet. No music, no TV, no scrolling through his phone for digital distractions. Just silence, and the echoes of himself. He sat on the floor that evening, cross-legged, phone face down, a notebook beside him. He opened it slowly. On the first page he wrote, "Who have I let in and why?" It was the question that opened the dam. He wrote for hours, not about them, but about him. Not their sins, but his surrender. The small permissions he gave every day. The boundaries he let blur. The red flags he rationalized into pinks and pastels. He remembered Devika, the manipulator, and how her approval lit up places in him he thought had long gone dim. But it wasn't her magic that made him glow. It was the part of him that craved to be seen, to be chosen. He had mistaken attention for affection. He wrote about Sanjay's lies and how part of him envied Sanjay's brazen confidence. How he too had sometimes inflated a title or softened a failure to keep up. Jung's words came to mind again. We meet ourselves time and again in 1,000 disguises on the path of life. It wasn't just that Sanjay lied. It was that Arav feared the truth wouldn't be enough. Ria's pain had mirrored his own. He saw in her a past version of himself. Young, aching, misunderstood. But where he sought healing, she sought permanence in her pain. Their closeness had become a mutual hostage situation, each enabling the other to avoid real growth. And Arjun, he wasn't just narcissistic. He was a mirror to Arav's own moments of inflated ego, times when he had mistaken validation for worth, applause for love. Arjun had simply turned the volume up louder on what Arav kept dim. Mira's envy cut deepest, not because of what she said, but because of how familiar it was. He too had once watched others soar and wondered, why not me? The difference was he had turned envy inward, into drive. Mira turned hers outward, into sabotage. And Mrs. Lobo? She was just a woman in a world she no longer understood. But her gaze had held power only because a part of Arav still needed external permission to feel whole. He feared her judgment because he hadn't yet claimed his own truth. That night he didn't sleep, but he didn't toss either. He just lay on the couch, eyes open, watching the ceiling as moonlight carved shapes through his blinds. The next morning, he canceled everything. Meetings, calls, even lunch with a college friend. He packed a small bag and took the first train to Lonavala. The hills waited like old friends, quiet, patient, non-judging. He hiked for hours, alone but not lonely. Every step felt like therapy. Every breath a return. He found a secluded trail that led to a broken-down stone bench. He sat there, pulled out his notebook, and wrote another question. What does healing mean when the wounds are invisible? And this time the answer came not in words, but in memory. His mother, humming while folding clothes. His father, sitting silently on the balcony, sipping tea in the golden hour. His childhood room, with glow-in-the-dark stars still clinging to the ceiling. Home had never been about walls or addresses. It had been moments of stillness, of safety, of being unperformed. He wanted that again, not from someone else, but from within. So he began to rebuild. Not with resolutions or declarations, but with small, consistent acts of integrity. He said no more often, not out of rejection, but out of self-respect. He began therapy, not to fix himself, but to understand his patterns. His therapist, a calm woman named Dr. Latha, never gave advice. She asked questions, and sometimes silence. In one session, Arav confessed, "I feel like I was complicit in every hurt I received." She nodded slowly. Awareness isn't self-blame, it's power. It's how you stop the cycle. He nodded, cried, laughed. He started journaling every day, not for productivity or reflection, but just to meet himself on paper. He walked without headphones, ate without screens, relearned the shape of boredom, and found, buried inside it, creativity. He reached out to people who had always been there, quiet presences who never asked for anything, but always showed up when it mattered. His old college professor, his childhood friend Neil, now a father of two, living in Pune. They spoke, reconnected. There was no drama, just peace. Months passed, then a year. The city hadn't changed. The skyline still blinked in neon. The streets still pulsed. But Arav had changed. He walked differently, not faster, but firmer. His emails were shorter. His weekends were longer. His circle was smaller, but warmer. One afternoon, he bumped into Devika at a bookstore. She looked the same, only a little more tired around the eyes. "Arav," she said, as if tasting the name, "you look different." He smiled. "I am." They spoke for 5 minutes. She talked about new ventures, hinted at some upcoming partnership. He nodded politely. Then as she offered her number again, he said, "No, thank you." Not unkind, just final. She blinked, then smiled, perhaps for real this time. "Fair," and walked away. That evening, Arav wrote, "Healing is not becoming invulnerable. It's becoming unwilling to bleed for what doesn't nourish you." He stuck the note to his mirror. Years passed. He built a consultancy, focused on ethical branding, created a podcast, taught a workshop at his old university. And when people came, liars, manipulators, victims, narcissists, the envious, the judgmental, he didn't hate them. He just didn't follow them. He saw their wounds, saw his own reflection in some, and chose not to reopen scars for the illusion of connection. Instead, he found his tribe, the honest, the seekers, the awkwardly authentic, the ones who didn't shine always, but glowed steadily. And in their presence, he became more of himself, whole. If you want to see more such videos and want to change your life, then please subscribe to our channel and share this video. Thanks for watching.